Rob Skiba.
Yes, sir.
Daniel Ott of The Edge.
Hey, Daniel Ott, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing outstanding. So great to have you back on the program, Rob.
Thank you. Good to be back.
All right. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about the Nephilim and the giants. And I was extolling your prolific writing and the productions that you make. You've taken those talents and you're in the search for truth, and you have a really nice way to present them to people in digestible chunks and easy to listen to too. But before we get into that, I want to know what drives Rob Skiba in this search for truth and these esoteric subjects.
You know, that's a great question. I've always been driven to want to know what the truth is because I can't stand being lied to. And my awakening to sort of the truth movement, if you will, was the realization that 9/11 was an inside job. And that came as a result of when I was a missionary. I was a missionary for 6.5 years. I was on a plane ride to Kazakhstan, and it's like a 14-hour flight. And the people behind me, this is right around 2006, the people behind me, almost the entire flight, were talking about how 9/11 was an inside job.
Really?
And it was driving me crazy because I'm third-generation Army guy, Boy Scout, patriotic, rah-rah as they come, And it was just making me mad. I mean, I felt like just reaching back there and smacking both of those people silly,
Mm-hmm.
But, of course, I didn't. I just sat there and listened to it, like the whole flight. And I did my thing in Kazakhstan. But when I got home from that trip, I was determined to prove what they said to be wrong. I knew I would never see them again, but just for my own satisfaction, I'm like, I want to prove them wrong,
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking. Most of their thesis was coming from Michael Moore's film Fahrenheit 9/11, which I'm not a Michael Moore fan at all. But I went ahead and got the film, and I also rented Fahrenheit 9/11, which was like a debunk film of Fahrenheit.
Right. Okay.
And all it did was give me more questions. It didn't really solve anything for me. And so I started doing my own research, and that's when I stumbled on Loose Change.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, that's the gateway video for getting into that. And it was a shock to me. And, those who have done that research know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's a paradigm shift. Your whole world starts to crash around you. And the more I dug into that, the more I started finding things like our presidents being all related to each other. And, oh, man, the rabbit hole's very deep. And the more I dug, the more I realized I got to get this out. I mean, at that time, nobody that I knew in my sphere of influence was aware of any of those things. Mm-hmm. So I started pushing this stuff out any way that I could. And, ultimately it led to writing. 2011 is where I started blogging, and I blogged for the whole year. Whatever I thought about that morning, I just would write that day. And at the end of the year, I saw that I had written about 1,000 pages, if you printed it out, worth of content. And I thought, well, I should make these into books. So Babylon Rising became the first of that series.
Mm-hmm. All right. You said you heard that conversation on a plane.
Yeah.
Wasn't that dangerous for somebody to be talking about 9/11 or planes or bombs or anything? I mean, it sounds to me like the marshal may have come running over there.
That's a good point. Nobody stopped them. They did talk for a long time. But yeah, it's like one of those taboo subjects, on a plane, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. What are those 3 degrees of coming to the truth? You probably know better than I do. The first are anger.
Mocking. I forget what it is exactly, but basically.
Then acceptance.
Finally, it's accepted as self-evident.
Mm-hmm. Well, skipping to it from you obviously you said that you were angry at first, and then but and then really my personal story kind of mirrors that in some way. Those longtime viewers of this program know that I said that my kids were given fluoride in school, and I said, "What?" I was angry. I said, "Well, they came and said that other parents didn't let their kids have it." And I said, well, "What's wrong with these other parents? Are they nutcases running in the woods?" And so I was angry about it, and I went and started to research myself and tell these people just quit being a freak. Obviously fluorides and everything. And when I did the study, I go, "Whoops, wait a minute. This is something wrong here."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you start seeing, aspartame and fluoride and chemtrails, I mean, all that stuff, it's part of the journey. You go down that rabbit hole and you realize, there is an agenda, and the agenda is to kill you. And they went ahead and put it they carved it in stone, put it up in a monument, Georgia Guidestone, say, hey, we want to bring us down from 7.5 billion people to 500 million.
It doesn't seem though if you add up all the diseases, all the head hacks of ISIS and the little squabble wars here and there. The population, it seems like it's vastly replacing those. It's not a quick pro quo decrease. There's the increase regardless of all the the chemtrails and the poisons and the food additives and the cancers and all of it. Isn't the population outpacing that, all of it?
Well, they're doing the best they can. Yes, the population is definitely increasing, but what quality of life is it when so many people are dying of cancer and have all kinds of ailments? And I think they've kind of maybe shifted some of their tactics and realized they can get rich off of pumping us full of pharmaceuticals that just make things worse.
Yeah, from our live chat, it came through. We were asking the question that there 1 through 5: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance is probably the clinical
strategy. That's the stages of grief. The stages of grief. The 5 stages of grief, and that's certainly applicable too. But there's another one I think that you're referring to about truth, and it's similar though. I mean, you do end up with basically the same. Same results ultimately. So
it was a 9/11 category that brought you into it, but that seems to be a far event sequence from Nephilim returning to the earth and giants roaming the land. I don't know how do you get there from a plane to a giant?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah. When you start going on the rabbit trail, and you start seeing connections and stuff, and ultimately what you realize is what we've been told is not the truth, and presidents, all being related to each other and all related to one guy. King John Lackland is the guy that all our presidents are related to. He's the guy who created the Lord Mayor Parade that they have every year in the UK, which honors the Nephilim gods, or the Nephilim giants, I should say, of Gog and Magog. So that was sort of the first connection. But then when you start looking into secret societies, Freemasonry, Illuminati, Skull and Bones and all that stuff, and you start realizing that secret societies and that sort of thing find their roots back to Nimrod and Babylon, that's what got me on that page. That's the rabbit trail that I took that led to the writing of Nimrod, Babylon, and the Nephilim ultimately.
Yeah. Somebody put in our live chat a book called The Lost History of the Giants. But now I was looking at that. I know you probably saw the Facebook post. I grabbed a screenshot from your website there, and that link is in your bio section. But it says, particularly concerning the Genesis one, which has references to giants in by itself, but you also talk about the synchronized, biblically endorsed extra biblical texts as supporting evidence, documentation of the existence of giants.
Yeah, well, as I was doing my research, certainly the Book of Enoch is the go-to place to find a lot of detail regarding the Nephilim and how they got here as a result of 200 Watcher-class angels that landed on Mount Hermon in the days of Jared. Anybody who studies the subject of the Nephilim ultimately finds himself looking in the Book of Enoch. And when I started talking about it, I started getting heat from a lot of Christians saying, well, that's not in the Bible. I said, well, true, it's not. It depends on which Bible you're talking about. There are, like the Ethiopians, they still have it in their Bible to this day. Various canons of Scripture did include it. But ultimately I decided, that's not an argument I really need to fight because truth, believe it or not, truth does exist outside of the Scriptures. I have I've read books. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I read books on how to use the software that I use in my computer, and guess what? It was true. It taught me the truth of how to use that software.
Ooh, man, you treading some dangerous ground there, man. You could get into the realm of all the names I've been called over the years.
I know.
Heretic and demon and everything.
I said, you know what? I don't need to fight the battle whether or not it should. I'm not qualified to decide what should and should not be considered canon. I don't have the qualifications to do that. So I thought, you know what? Maybe there's a better way of referring to them. And when I say them, I mentioned the Book of Enoch, but also there's other books like Joshua and Jubilees. These are books that are quoted in the Bible or mentioned by name, or we can find inference. Like, for instance, where Paul is talking to Timothy, and he talks about Jannes and Jambres as the two individuals that opposed Moses in Pharaoh's court. Well, they're not named in the Torah, so you can't get that from the canonized text. Where did Paul get that from? Well, clearly he must have read another source, and Joshua is as good as any that may have been quoted, because it's also mentioned in a couple other places by name in the Bible. So I thought, you know what? They're synchronized in the sense they follow the same chronological order of events that we find in Genesis. I call them biblically endorsed because under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, the authors of Scripture quoted from these books, mentioned them by name, or inferred things that can be found in these books. And I call them extra biblical because, of course, they're not found within the cover of our current Bible.
Well, we're not going to get into this subject tonight. The last time you were on, we were talking about the flat Earth. So let's just, because a couple questions have come in, let's kind of see if you get a kind of a closing statement for that, where you're at with that, and we'll move on from there. Anything on the flat Earth? What your kind of final statement of that is?
Final statement. Well, is that your final answer? That is the deepest rabbit hole I've ever been in my life, and I'm not quite sure how to find my way out of it, to be honest with you. Boy, the more I look into it, the more compelling it has become to me.
So you're saying it's not over?
No, it's not over.
No, and I thought that because I as you know, you're a Facebook friend as well, and so I'm seeing what's going on and the other things. So so there's some more study going on, eh?
Yeah, in fact, I've got some plans in the very near future, hopefully within the next month or so, to do some tests up at Lake Michigan. And because that's the thing, man, diehard ball earthers, people who believe in the ball, will say, well, we've all seen ships go over the curve of the Earth. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, well, let's test that. That's why I created the website, testingtheglobe.com. You're telling me that a ship rolled over the curve of the ball in about 10 miles distance from the observer on the beach. Okay, if that's true, if this thing allegedly rolled over the edge of the ball 10 miles out, then to see that ship again, you should have to rise up in the air and look down the ball to see it. The problem is the horizon rises with you, which is simply impossible on a ball. And I've tried it with physical examples, trying to do tests. I've done it in 3D software. I can't for the life of me get the ball horizon to rise with the observer as the observer goes up on the y-axis. It's just not possible. So then, I mean, you start seeing things. I've got a reservoir near my house. It's about 6 miles across, and I've got the Nikon Coolpix P900, which is like this amazing camera. It has an 83 power optical zoom plus a digital zoom on top of it, so you can really zoom in on far away stuff. And I'm seeing stuff that, according to ball Earth math created by people who believe in the ball, for the Earth is supposedly 25,000 miles in circumference, 8 inches per mile squared, basically, is the general rule of thumb. I'm seeing things, and others all around the world are seeing things that you should not be able to see according to the math. So I tried to let this thing go in October 15th. I said, hey, I gave 6 months of my life to dedicated research on this. I got to move on and get to other things. And as much as I've tried, and dude, I have tried to let this go. People keep sending me stuff. I keep finding stuff on my own. It's all I can say is it's the most compelling thing I've looked into so far, and it's the knee-jerk response everybody has is because they haven't spent an hour worth of time doing research. So
see, I thought that you just dropped the flat Earth sticky bomb and walked away, but evidently you're still lobbing them in there, man.
Yeah, it's still coming out. I got some more tests coming up, and I'll of course post them as I conclude them.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get to this question here. Colt 45 out of the live chat says the Andy Hoy Tabernacle idea is interesting.
Oh, gosh.
Can it mean that the Solomon Temple may have had a different shape than we've been taught?
Ooh, it's funny that this person brought that up. We had a Bible study, Torah study this afternoon, and I literally just wrote that note in my notebook today that I was looking at the King Solomon's temple and the descriptions given for it. And Andy's pretty convinced. I'm not yet convinced, but I think he's pretty convinced. I don't want to speak for him, but I believe he believes that there's good evidence that Solomon's temple mirrored the tabernacle in the wilderness, and his research is extremely compelling, that it was a very large dome-shaped tent, not a rectangle. And if people are interested in looking into that, go to project314.org, project 314 for pi. He's a structural engineer by trade. His father, comes from that background and stuff. And he wasn't looking into flat Earth. That was not his objective. Mm-hmm. He was a structural engineer studying the tabernacle in the wilderness. And when you read about the various articles that go into the making of the tabernacle, we are given a very specific shopping list. And the Torah comes with a command: do not add or subtract from what is written.
Right.
Well, he started analyzing all the various models, and there are lots of people who build models of the tabernacle in the wilderness. But in order for that model to be structurally sound, you have to add a whole bunch of stuff to the shopping list that Moses was given, which would be adding to the Torah. And if you don't, it becomes a very unstable, a box or a rectangle is the most unstable structure you can have. Yeah. And he's looking at this. He goes, well, why does everybody even come to the conclusion that it's a rectangle in the first place? Because it never says that it's a rectangle. And when he looked at the command with the curtains, it says connect the curtains at the ends. Well, everybody assumes it's connecting at the long end. And so when you do that, you end up with a box. But he said, well, what if you connect them at the short end? There's nothing that says I couldn't do that. So when he connected the curtains at the short end, you come up with a very different structure. You come up with a circle with a very large dome over it. Wow. And, he wasn't coming at it from a flat Earth perspective. He was just, as a structural engineer, independently doing this research, and he was trying to be a biblical literalist, saying, okay, this is the shopping list that Moses was given after a blueprint that he was given. He was shown something in heaven, and he said he was told to model this on earth. And this guy Bezalel was the guy that actually did it, and this other guy Oholiab. Well, as a biblical literalist, he's trying to prove his point, and he stumbles on my research, also trying to be a biblical literalist, and I create this model based on what I'm reading from a literal perspective of a circle enclosed dome world. And he's like, I think we need to talk. So he sends me this big package in the mail that I additionally ignored because I get so much stuff I don't have time to look at. And somebody else that knew both of us connected us and says, if he sent you the package, you got to look at it. And I did. I interviewed him on my radio show a few months back. It's extremely compelling, and the idea that Solomon's temple could have followed the same model is equally compelling, but we end up with a very different model for the second temple, and of course Herod built upon the second model, mm-hmm. which is the model that Jesus or Yeshua saw in his day. Mm-hmm. So again, I got that package in the mail almost immediately after I said, I'm done, I'm not looking at this anymore. And then this comes in the mail. I'm like, really, God, seriously? People, go look at it for yourself. Project314.org. It's very compelling.
I know what you mean about life change because every once in a while, now I've been doing this show since 2004, and and a lot of it's just a labor of love. And so at some point, you think you do a show, and think, okay, well, maybe I could just, maybe move on and just kind of close it down. And then all of a sudden, a letter will come in. And I'm sure it happened to you, and say, man, heard what you said, or somebody said something, and my life changed. And you go, oh crap, I've got, there's responsibilities here. There's people's lives being affected, and or hopefully positive. And so, you amble on and keep on going. All right, let's get to this question here for you, Rob Skiba. The Nephilim giants, could they have came from pre-Adamic humans, not fallen angel messengers?
Well, I'm familiar with that theory. I would say the Book of Enoch disagrees with that theory. So I'm going with what I can read from the ancient Hebrew texts, specifically the Book of Enoch, which, as you mentioned earlier, goes into a great deal of amount of detail regarding 200 Watcher-class angels that came down to Mount Hermon in the days of Jared and mated with women, and they produced a creature, a hybrid that we call the giants or the Nephilim. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going with that, but I'm familiar with some of the other arguments.
Well, now right there, this old cowboy here got into trouble with that because talking about the giants mating with earth women. One show, and there have been a number of guests over the years that were on that topic, though I like talking to you the best about it. But anyway, I pressed the issue. I wanted to know, okay, let's run this thing through the system here. Is there a plumbing issue? And I said, well, let's figure this plumbing thing out here because we're talking about giants and we are talking about earth women. Right. And then I got some hate mail from that saying, that I shouldn't ask those. Well, why can't you ask that question?
It's a reasonable question. And I asked the question also, when you first come across that information, you're like, what? But you must realize that there are several times in the scriptures where angels appeared to people, and they appeared every bit as human, as normal humans, We read in the text that they're angels, but, when Abram is approached by the three angels, and then the other ones go down to Sodom and Gomorrah, and later we read that we could be entertaining angels unaware, that people could be in front of us talking to us, and we may not even know that they are angels. And they apparently have the plumbing to eat and drink, and which would presumably involve digestion and then excretion.
Right.
So it's like, well, if they've got the plumbing for that, is it such a stretch then that they could have the plumbing for other things?
Yeah.
And the ancient text would just point blank does tell you that that's what they did. Yeah. And the alternative view of Genesis 6 that is preached and taught to people in seminaries and stuff these days is that the sons of God were the good sons of Seth and the daughters of men were the bad daughters of Cain, which, of course, the text doesn't say.
Yeah.
That doctrine, that whole idea doesn't even show up until about 160 A.D. Prior to 160 A.D., the unanimous view of the ancient world was that it was angels. And even Josephus, the first century historian, comes right out and tells you that it's angels. Yeah. And I do a presentation on it and talk about, the book of Job predates Genesis, and when it talks about the sons of God, it uses that phrase, like in Job 38, verse 7, it talks about the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy at the time of creation. Well, Seth's kids weren't there at creation. The sons of God was a phrase used in Job for angels, and picked up, of course, by Moses, used the same phrase. But, you got Philo in about 50 A.D. Talking about that it was angels. You've got Clement, disciple of Peter, same thing. Of course, Josephus and others. But here's the thing. When you get to 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 6, here's two canonized authors who talk about these angels that sinned and that were bound in chains, and Peter comes out and tells you they're put in Tartarus, which in the Greek mythology is understood the prison of the gods. And
I like that.
Yeah, so you're like, okay, if it's not angels in Genesis 6, then what the heck are Peter and Jude talking about? Because we know that Satan and his angels are still out and about. They're the principalities and powers of spiritual wickedness in high places that Paul says we're wrestling against. That the devil goes about as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. So they're out and about. So that begs the question then, which angels are these that are currently bound in chains in Tartarus?
All right.
And Jude quotes from the book of Enoch, so he was reading it. And with Peter mentioning that, you can certainly derive an inference there that Peter must have read it too.
Now those quotes from Enoch in there irks traditionalists who say there's no extracurricular books, but when you got Bible people quoting from him, then you got to answer that.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, I was a kid going through the Bible, and there's I used to have a list. I don't remember all of them now, but there's dozens of books mentioned in the Bible that are not in the Bible, and I always be like, well, where's that book? And I do believe we have a few of them. I put a couple of them into one volume, but it is undeniable that the ancient view prior to 160 A.D. was that it was angels.
Oh, you mentioned just briefly there talking about the biological processes or we were talking together about the biological processes that would necessitate the existence of a biological entity. One that, as we mentioned, the processing of food. It's interesting you said that because last week our guest was talking about flying humanoids, and I brought that fact up that if they're flying humanoids and they're flying around, I said, well, how do I know that what drops on my clean truck windshield, instead of maybe it wasn't a pigeon, maybe it was one of these flying humanoids? And I nearly got hung up on that one, Rob, because there was dead air. I don't know if you ever in an interview you say something and just dead air. It's like you just 1 second away from a click.
Right. Yeah. Uh-oh. Did I cross a line?
I brought him back because he was startled. But I brought him back. He kind of, and so and later he took it well, because after the show he Skyped me and said, thanks for the great interview. I'm going to check my windshield. So but it was bad. All right. So here's another question for you. Can you talk a little bit more about your sci-fi project, The Seed? What's going on there?
Oh yeah, man. Thanks. Well, 2015, I thought was going to be the year that I was really going to move forward with that project. But in April of 2015 is when I got roped down the flat Earth rabbit trail, and like I said earlier, I haven't come out of it yet. This year, I'm definitely making an effort to try to get back on that track again. I'm going out to California in April to do some follow up with some producers and stuff that I had made contact with last year. And it's interesting, just in the last, 2 to 3 weeks, I've received a number of emails from people wanting to get involved in the project. And the problem is, I don't have the money right now to pay people to get involved with the project. So, I'm not getting paid either. It's a passion project right now until we're funded. But these people that have recently contacted me that want to help with the graphic novel that I started working on last year, I've got a team. Just right before you called me, I was reading an email from a team of video game programmers that are already working on the first video game for it.
Nice.
And so these are things that are going to help fund the TV series. It kind of got slowed down there during the whole flat Earth research, but I think that's all been for a reason too, because all that research is not going to go for nothing. One way or another, it's going to play into the storyline, I'm sure. So we're moving forward with it, but we still got to raise a significant amount of money to go into television production.
Man, I tell you what, I thought I was a multitasker. Hey, let me ask. Let's dive a little bit into the classic Ephesians 6:12. Scripture, which says, of course, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, with this world, spiritual weakness, high places. Okay, let's talk about the wrestle part. It said we are wrestling. So is our body, and I know somebody say, well, we just, say a little prayer and, that's what it means. But it sounds to me there's more of a battle there. Is our spirits going out in some way, in some release when we do pray, when we charge after the demonic hordes? Are we going out and really wrestling these things? Or is it more just sort of a innocuous, hope you're feeling better type of thing, and I'll say a prayer for you, whatever?
Well, there would be some people who would certainly give testimony of physical wrestling with these entities, especially if there's any of your listeners out there who've ever dealt with the shadow people. I have. I've personally dealt with shadow people, and it's not a pleasant situation.
Stop there. I want to know about shadow people. We'll get back to that.
Okay.
What happened? Let's hear that story.
Okay. There was a period of time in my life. I'm trying to remember exactly when it began. I want to say it was probably when I was about 17, maybe 17. Let's just say 17 till about 33, 34, somewhere in that time period, where I was fairly regularly assaulted by shadow people. And it was back in 1997, I decided to write a script about it. And I was literally writing a movie screenplay called The Shadow People. And I had Art Bell radio show kind of playing in the background. And it was Open Line Friday. I think it was Friday, whatever, the day he did Open Lines. And this guy calls in. And he says, Art, I've had these experiences where I've been attacked by, I don't know what else to call them. I call them shadow people. Now, I'm freaking out because I'm literally looking at the script that I'm writing right in front of me titled The Shadow People. And I hear this guy on the radio saying that. I'm like, what? So, of course, I stop writing. I'm listening. Well, Art's phone lines just lit up. I mean, his board just practically blew up with people calling him from all over the world saying that they had similar experiences. So I called him, and I actually got on. I got on the show and shared some of my experiences. And it became quite the phenomena for Coast to Coast there for a while. He had his webmaster. He said, well, I don't know what I've just stumbled on here, but obviously it's a hot topic. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask my webmaster to create a page, and you guys just draw pictures of what you've experienced, what you've seen, and send them to my webmaster. And he gave the address, and we'll put them up on the website. Well, people did that, and everybody was drawing the same thing. And some of them were drawing this one entity that became known as the Hat Man. And the Hat Man is a shadow person. It looks like he's wearing like a trench coat with like a derby hat. Did you see the movie Dark City?
Yeah, I think so. Long time. Well, a couple of years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was back in the 90s. I think.
Okay, yeah, a lot of years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it showed these guys in trench coats with derby hats, kind of floating, flying humanoids in this dark city, And I think a lot of people who've had the experience with the Hat Man freaked out when that movie came out. I know I did. And it was one of those things that I didn't talk about. I didn't tell people about it until I joined the Army. It started happening in the mid to late 80s, and then I joined the Army in 86, and ended up working at this aircraft hangar. I was a helicopter mechanic before I became a pilot, and was talking with this other guy named Dave, and we're just shooting the breeze, talking about all kinds of stuff, and somehow this subject came up of weird, freaky, paranormal stuff, and I shared some of my experiences with the shadow people, and this guy was like finishing my sentences. And that was the first time I had ever met somebody else who had the same experiences. I had not personally seen the Hat Man myself, but Dave did.
Yikes.
And my experiences were the classic sleep paralysis, where you can't move, and this thing would jump on me, and it was always trying to choke me. That's what it would do. It would try to strangle me. Mm-hmm. And the name of Jesus would make it flee. In the name of Jesus, I command you to get out of here. I rebuke you, whatever, it would go. Mm-hmm. Why did these things start happening? Well, I started trying to figure that out, and the conclusion I can come to is two possible reasons why doorways could have been opened. One, a friend of mine who ended up moving and living with us, his sister was really into Ouija boards and doing that sort of stuff, which certainly invites in that type of entity. And then my sister went through a rebellion stage in her life where she kind of got sick of the church, and because they were judging her for things that she didn't do. And she's like, fine, if you're going to judge me, I didn't do these things, but if you're going to judge me, I might as well just do them anyway, So she started going out and doing things she shouldn't have done, and got involved with Wicca. And started, meeting friends that were witches in real life. So, did that bring, I don't know, but those are certainly possibilities. And another possibility might be, and I don't know if you remember this, but I remember back in, the late 70s and early 80s, people doing Mary Walsh and Bloody Mary.
Yeah.
In front of mirrors, remember?
Yeah, and there's another one with pencils.
Yeah. I forgot what that one's. Man. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I had a sleepover with some of my friends one night, and we had a big picture window and one of those huge mirrors over the fireplace, and it was almost midnight, and one of my friends is like, hey, you want to do the Mary Walsh thing, And we're like, no way, it's too freaky. No, I don't want to do it, And but he did it. Of course, we all hid under the covers. I ain't looking. So, I don't know. Do these things open doorways? Could be. All I know is that I had this experience for a number of years, and the thing followed me around too. When I left the military in '93, I ended up doing some paramilitary operations and worked up in all over the place. But I was up in Fort Kent, Maine, doing a job up there, and I just before I went to bed, I remember I was in a hotel. I remember looking over at the closet, going, something not quite right about that closet, And sure enough, later that night, I got attacked again. And then eventually, I moved down to Texas, and it followed me down here where I am now. And the last one was in 2003, and that was the most brutal, scary of all of them. And after that one, and that one, I tried to rebuke it in the name of Jesus, but it wasn't working. I could hear it was I was speaking, but it wasn't my voice coming out of my mouth, if that makes sense. It was really, whether it was a dream, I don't know, but that thing wasn't going. And at that time in my life, I had been in the middle of going through a really painful divorce and pretty much wanted to die anyway. So I was like, all right, fine. If that's what you want to do, take me. I know where I'm going, so get it over with. And then it left. So between the name of Jesus, rebuking these things, obviously it must be demonic, and they feed on fear. They certainly cause fear.
Wait a minute. It didn't leave with the departure of the ex, did it?
No. But you know what's interesting is when I was with her, well, because it happened before her too, but when I was with her, she actually saw the thing. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy, because there was one night when we were married that the thing attacked me in our bed, and she saw it. So, that's where it's okay. It's not just me. I'm not just crazy here. She saw it too. But the last one, after that last one, I had some friends come over, and we just anointed my apartment with oil, and blessed the place and cast out demons and did a whole exorcism, and it never been back since.
Well, Rob, you sounds to me like you're just not writing books and DVDs and producing different things from a observer standpoint. You're writing some of these things from a person who experienced things.
Yeah, exactly. That's that's why a lot of the things I'm doing is coming from personal experience and drawing from these types of things, and realizing since then books have come out on the Shadow People, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners probably either have experienced or know somebody who has. A lot of people have been talking about it since the Art Bell show. So stuff's real.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I would say, going back to your initial question on Ephesians 6:12, that I think certainly there are people who have physically wrestled with these things and demon-possessed people and that sort of thing. But then again, you ever read the book This Present Darkness by Frank Peretti?
No.
Wow, this book came out, I think, back in the 80s. It's the first Christian novel that I've ever read that I actually really enjoyed and read through in one sitting. And the first 4 chapters are kind of slow, but in the fourth, I think it was about the 4th chapter, there's this old woman praying in a church. And Frank Peretti opens up the spirit realm and shows what her prayers are doing. And I mean, it was like, Star Wars-ish, Jedi against the Sith kind of stuff. It was like the prayers of the saints were empowering the good angels to fight against the bad angels. And really, really cool book. So
there's so there could be a force, because like I say, as we opened it up there, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. So but it indicates in a first person that we are wrestling, and I would expect, I'm surmising, to a victorious ending, at least putting them at something at bay. So then you're suggesting that it is possible, from what you just said from this present darkness, that the prayers are enabling Foo Fighters, some kind of fighter, to take the fight to the demonic hordes. Yeah,
I don't know if that's the way it really happens, but I could tend to agree with.
Or let me put you. Okay, I just had an idea. Did you ever see the movie Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell?
Oh, well, yeah, a long time ago.
Okay, there in one scene, two Chinese guys, they're moving their fingers, and their warriors project like a laser beam into the air, and they're using them like little remote controls, and they're battling in the air. So maybe that's the way it is. Our prayers are sort of like they
power the good guys to fight the bad guys.
Yeah, but maybe it's an extension of ourselves. Maybe we're going up there. We are eternal spiritual beings, and maybe perhaps, I always want to know the clarification on the wrestle, because it's always kind of milked down to, think happy thoughts or or whatever. But maybe there's more of a literal battle that's taking place there. And let's go to this question here. Oh, by the way, what happens when a hat person wearing a derby meets a television host wearing a Stetson, don't you?
What?
We kick his butt right back to hell, man.
There you go.
Stetson wins over a derby every time. All right, let's go to this question from Zaza out of the live chat for you, Rob Skiba. Have you ever seen shadow animals?
No, I have not, but I know others have. Yeah, I've heard testimonies of others who have had the shadow animal experience.
So, do you think the same entity that drives the shadow people is animating an animal figure, but really it's the same sort of demon behind the thing?
I've got a theory, and it's based on Enoch. I think it's chapter 15, where it describes where demons come from, and Enoch tells you that demons are not fallen angels. Fallen angels are just normal angels that rebelled, that they have bodies of their own. They can, shapeshift apparently into become like humans or what have you. But demons, on the other hand, are the disembodied spirits of former angel-human hybrid Nephilim. And I extend the definition of Nephilim. I know some people think it's exclusively angel-human hybrids, but Numbers 13:33 tells you that the giants, the Anakim, were Nephilim that came from other Nephilim. So now you have at least 2 types of Nephilim. You got angel-human Nephilim, and you have Nephilim, later generation Nephilim, that Nephilim that came from other Nephilim. I believe that there might be a third type category, which would include the animal-human hybrids of mythology, like the satyrs and the minotaurs, centaurs.
I like it. Well, that would explain some of that. I mean, and I've expressed this question on the show before. We're all, the Greeks and the Romans and maybe even the Egyptians, they seemed to be very intelligent. They made beautiful structures. Yeah. They had organizations. It didn't seem like they had a predilection to have wild, goofy thoughts. There was a cat man or a centaur, right. Maybe perhaps there was in fact those things around.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that. I've been to Greece twice, and on my second trip, when I was second time in Athens, I was on top of Mars Hill, where Paul talked with the Stoics and everything up there. Yep. And I'd been down in the marketplace where he was, and he saw the statue to the unknown god and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And you got the Parthenon and everything. It's like everywhere you look when you go over there, you see the toppled remains of a temple, a god, or some kind of representation of an animal-human hybrid, satyr type or centaur, what have you. And I came home from that trip, the second one, and I told my wife, I said, all those animal-human hybrids in mythology, yeah, I said, I think they were real. And the reason I thought they were real is because, George Lucas, when he was making Star Wars, he said, I'm creating a modern mythology. Well, if the stuff that we, the Odyssey and the Iliad and all that stuff, Homer's, mythology, if it's just mythology, why are people still, why is it so prevalent still in the human consciousness, even to this day, and through multiple cultures at that, unless there was some basis in reality to it? Nobody's going to remember Yoda 4,000 years from now, So we had this conversation, and then the next morning she wakes up and she goes in the other room, checks her email, and she clicks on a link, sees a RSS news feed, a BBC news report, saying that scientists had just successfully cloned a sheep with a human heart. And the article went on to say, if we keep doing this type of thing, eventually the genes are going to fuse together and we're going to end up with animal-human hybrids. And, of course, all the ethical issues we'll have to deal with after that. Yeah. It's like the next morning. So you want to talk about confirmation of an idea, that popped in my head. I believe they were real. How else do you explain, still in everybody's memory to this day, hardcore? I got a friend of mine who grew up in Greece and went through the Greek educational system. And I was talking about the Greek gods and Greek myths and stuff like that. And he stopped me one time in the conversation. He says, dude, you keep saying myth, but I got to tell you, when I grew up in school, they didn't teach it to us in Greece as myth. That was taught to us as our history.
Really?
So, yeah,
not too long. Have you ever seen the pictures of, I think they had a rat with a human ear growing on its back?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then they've already put the genes of codfish into tomatoes. There's a lot of Tom Horn talking about the transhumanists. There is some something's going to get out of the lab, Rob, and it's not they're going to want rights.
Oh yeah. I think some of it probably already has gotten out of the lab in some of these places, like was it Nantucket? Was it with the Montauk monster there?
Yeah.
Plum Island and. Yeah, of course, Tom Horn's done a tremendous amount of work on transhumanism and that sort of stuff, and it's happening. In fact, when I was first on the public scene talking about this stuff in front of audiences back in 2011, I was giving a speech and talking about animal-human hybrids, and I believe that is part of the "as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man" prophecy that Yeshua gave in Matthew 24:37. While I was talking about the possibility that animal-human hybrids are going to come back, somebody got a news feed on their phone while I was talking saying that the UK had just announced 140 animal-human chimera created in the laboratory and told me about it in the middle of my talk. So it's like, talk about confirmation, right there as you're speaking. So, what has been will be again, and that's why we're seeing it, in the news again.
Yeah, somebody just, or Jade, our moderator, just put a picture of what is known as the Montauk Monster in our live chat going on there. So there are evidences of current technology that's delving into these cross-animal human hybrids, but then you can go back, and we were talking about the general thesis of our talk, of course, is the giants and the Nephilim, but there are plenty of mounds around the world that have no other reason to be there other than the historical context is that originally they found giant skeletons in there. But on the internet, Rob, as you probably know, there's a lot of pictures of giant skeletons. Are those hoaxes, photoshopped, or do you think some of those are real?
some may be real, but I think Joe Taylor is another researcher. He's done a really good job of debunking a lot of them, showing the clear evidence that this is Photoshop that we're looking at. I did a conference with Dr. Judd Burton and Joe Taylor out in Lubbock a couple months ago, and part of Joe's presentation was addressing some of those images that we see online. But Steve Quayle has got the Genesis 6 Giants book, and it's an 8.5 by 11 thick, 500-page book, full of documented accounts, historical accounts of finds of giants. Well,
now, Steve Quayle, isn't he suggesting that at some point we're going to see an army of giants just walking down the street?
Yeah, I can't say for sure exactly what he said in that regard, but it seems to me that is a very likely a possibility that could happen. When the first time I ever heard about that, I was listening to an interview Tom Horn did with Spencer Bennett, and he was talking about the Septuagint version of Isaiah 13, and it talks about a ruler in the last days, I believe, in Babylon. It says something to the effect of, "Speak to the gates, ye ruler, beckon with the hand, giants are coming to fulfill my wrath." And you don't quite get that when you read the King James in Isaiah 13, but if you go look at Brenton's Septuagint, it certainly does appear that we could be seeing them making a return.
Well, there in Matthew 27 or 24:37, when it says, "Such as the days of Noah, so shall be the Son of Man coming." Well, in the days of Noah, weren't there giants? Isn't that where a lot of this is supposed to be getting credibility?
Yeah, absolutely. For those of us who are trying to take a literal view of things and drawing a strictly literal parallel, that's what I'm trying to do, and I believe Steve Quayle and Tom Horn and some of the others probably are as well. It begs the question: okay, why did Jesus say that? I mean, prior to that, the disciples asked him, "What are the signs going to be of what they're going to be like before you return?" And he talks about wars and rumors of wars and famine, pestilence, earthquakes. Well, we've always had those things. Now, of course, they're going to happen in increasing measure in the last days, but what differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in human history? And I would have to say it's the creation of hybrids, animal human as well as the angel human and Nephilim, and it was quite a period of time. If you realize that Noah lived 950 years, 600 before the flood and 350 after, and a whole lot of crazy stuff is going on both sides of his lifetime, then I believe this is my personal opinion. I believe that we are in the beginning of seeing the days of Noah manifest, and I believe Genesis 6:3 is a scripture that's a lot of times overlooked and or twisted and manipulated to mean things that it doesn't, where it talks about that man's days should be 120 years, and because he's flesh, and God says, "My spirit will no longer dwell with man." Now, people take that and spin it off into 120 jubilees is the whole of human history and all kinds of stuff, but that's not what the text is talking about. I believe that what's happening there, especially when you compare Genesis with the synchronized biblically endorsed extra-biblical texts, that in the last 120 years leading up to the flood, i.e. the last 120 years of Methuselah's life, that's when you started to see what Joshua 4:18 and Jubilee 7:24 describe as the mixture of species of animals with humans and birds and reptiles and fish, and the blending of species was what took place in the latter days of Methuselah in the last 120 years. I believe we are just about a decade or so into, if we follow that exact pattern, then we're just about a decade or so into that repeat.
All right, Rob, we're right at the top of the hour here. We take about a 5-minute break. Why don't you tell the folks what they can find on that link you sent me, which is posted in your bio section.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, they could just go to – I've actually got a new website that I didn't give you. It's robschannel.com. robschannel.com is sort of the new hub to get you to everywhere else, but the link I sent you was to my other website, BabylonRisingBooks.com.
Yeah, with everything you're doing, there does need to be a hub, man. And so it sounds to me like you've got a bunch of rabbit holes that people can go down at any time. All right, Rob, just stay on the line. We'll bring you back up here in just about 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right. All right, everybody. You're watching and or listening to the Edge Television broadcast tonight. Our guest, of course, is Rob Skiba, talking about giants and the Nephilim. And if you missed any of the exciting first hour, the whole show will begin to replay directly after this show ends, and we'll put it up in our YouTube channel, pop-up player, and podcast it, and in our TuneIn Radio queue list, which plays all of our shows 24 hours a day across any platform, any device. Typically, it's great to listen to on the phone. All right, we'll take a 5-minute break. We're going to be right back. And welcome back to the Edge Television broadcast. My name is Daniel Lott. If you have a question for tonight's guest, Rob Skiba, go to the edgeam.com website. Click on the Fast Blast link on the left side of the website. That is our email client. And remember, we cannot reply to that. It is a one-way ticket to get that question in here. Otherwise, you can post your questions in the live chat going on now, where Jade, our moderator, will send them over to me on a secret Skype channel. Speaking of a secret Skype channel, let's go back to our Skype line with Rob Skiba. Rob, welcome back.
Thanks, Daniel.
All right, well, good to have you back. And we're talking about the Nephilim and giants. Would you have a conjecture that they're going to just sort of we'll see the effects of them on the earth, or do you feel like there will be an actual visual expression of their beings, or is there going to be an invasion?
A little of all of the above, I think. I think that when you look at what happens in Revelation chapter 9 when the bottomless pit is opened, that these are chimeric centaurs that are coming up. If you read the description of the locusts, they're described as like horses with lion teeth, human hair, and scorpion tails. They appear to be chimeric centaurs. And what I found interesting about that is it says they have a king over them, who in the Greek is Apollyon, which is a derivative spelling of Apollo. Well, if you look in the Greek mythology, the centaurs were fathered by an individual named Centaurus, who was a son of Apollo. So, John's audience would have been intimately aware of what he was saying when he wrote that, So I think we have that variety. We have whatever's going on with the Isaiah 13, speak to the gates, you ruler giants are coming to fulfill my wrath scenario. We have the scenario where, there's supposedly, Steve Quayle's done reports on this, where our troops in Afghanistan have apparently encountered cannibalistic giant. I think it was like 10 feet tall or something like that over there. So there may be some out and about. Of course, Bigfoot, some of these others that, may be remnants of these things that are already out and about. But I also think there may be the variety that are going to be created in the laboratory in the form of the animal-human chimeras. And I was just thinking about this the other day. I forgot where I was in a retail store. Oh, I was at a Target or Walmart or someplace like that. And I'm walking by the kids aisle where the toys are, and it's all, X-Men and Marvel Comics and all this stuff. And I'm going, all these toys, these kids get these things and these outfits, and they want to be Iron Man or they want to be Wolverine or the Hulk or Spider-Man or whatever. It's very appealing. What kid doesn't want to be a superhero, right?
Right.
And I started to think, I bet you it was just, if we're looking at a repeat, if what we're looking at is what has been done before, then it was probably just as appealing in the pre-flood world to modify yourself, because you got to ask yourself what prompted them. The ancient texts say that they blended themselves with other animals and stuff.
Yeah.
Why would they do that? I believe that it was a very appealing idea to say, hey, are you tired of your human limitations, the senses that you have? Would you like to add radar, of a bat, or the sonar of a dolphin, or the eyes of an eagle, or run like a cheetah, or, how would you like to have these other abilities and these other senses,
Well, that must be an ingrained human psychic matter of the psyche, because today women want breast implants, men are trying to get penile implants, or we have transvestites, changing men to women. So people aren't happy, and of course some of the horror things. I don't know if you see them. I'm sure you get on your Facebook feed. Somebody will send a horror thing where somebody's had doctors put horns into their head, underneath their skin. So body modification and enhancement seems to be all the rage now. So just a trick on over there to the spiritual side, into the demonic force that can really enhance the human body to some mystical creature looking freak. That's going to be. It seems to me it's going to have wide acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's the real danger in the modification. It's one thing to put in various types of prosthetic implants and things like that. I've seen the people that put the horns in and, all these other things. But when it comes to a genetic modification, that's where I think it gets really scary and really different in terms of what happens there. If you go and look at, I'm going to just punch up Genesis 6:3. I mentioned it earlier.
Okay.
It says, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years." Well, we've been flesh since Adam. So what's going on here? Well, we know that Paul talks about our body as the temple of the Holy Ghost. That we were, in Genesis, Moses says that we created in the image and likeness of God. He created us as a temple to house himself. We're in his likeness, so he can indwell us. Mm-hmm. But if you start corrupting this temple, Doug Hamp's got a book called Corrupting the Image. I think it's appropriately titled. Mm-hmm. If we corrupt the image that God originally created in his likeness by blending ourselves genetically with other species, other animals and creatures, then we've corrupted this temple, and his spirit's not going to hang out there anymore. He dwells with like kind. So I think that's what's happening here. When you marry Genesis 6:3 up with Joshua 4:18 and Jubilees 7:24 and other ancient texts that talk about the blending of species, I think what God is really saying here is you better knock it off, because if you don't, you're going to corrupt your temple such that my spirit will no longer be able to inhabit it. And if that's the case, then we've created a vacancy for other spirits to inhabit. Mm-hmm. That's where I think it gets real scary.
Do you think that in the pre-flood, after it was written of the pre-flood, that all mankind was corrupted? Do you think that there was transhumanism or human hybrids, and that was the corruption?
Yeah, I believe, and this is where I would differ from some of the other Nephilim researchers out there, L.A. Marzulli, Steve Quayle, some of these, Tom Horn, some of these other guys, especially L.A. L.A. is really big on the multiple incursion idea, that angels kept coming back and mated with women and stuff like that. I don't subscribe to that. When I read the book of Enoch and look at the timeline, when they came down in the days of Jared, that was 1,200 years before the flood. Okay. And Enoch, I believe it's chapter 10, if I remember the address correctly, tells you specifically that the first generation Nephilim would only live for 500 years, and they were to kill each other off in a massive civil war that the Greeks later stylized into what became known as the Clash of the Titans. Josephus likens the first generation Nephilim to the Titans of Greek mythology. Well, the Clash of the Titans was over and done 500 years after the days of Jared, when the Watchers came down. That's still 700 years before the flood. And then the parents of the first generation Nephilim, after they were made to watch their children kill each other off, that was part of their severe judgment, they were then judged, bound, and buried in Tartarus. Well, all of that, that whole issue is overdone with, dealt with by 700 years before the flood. So that then begs the question, okay, if all of that was dealt with 700 years before the flood, what got God so upset to wipe out the whole world with the flood in the first place? 700 years later, and that's where I believe Genesis 6:12 comes in, which is also backed up by Jubilees 7:24 and Joshua 4:18, that it was the corruption of all flesh that brought back. Everybody talks about the return of the Nephilim after the flood, but I'm going to suggest there was a return of the Nephilim before the flood that came as a result of the creation of the animal-human hybrids and corrupting the temple such that God's spirit would no longer dwell with man, but that the former spirits of the Nephilim that were killed off in the Clash of the Titans would then indwell and thus have renewed physicality. If they're disembodied after being killed, well, their spirits are looking for a body. That's why demons always want to get into something. Then, if you corrupt the temple by creating a hybrid, God's spirit won't dwell there anymore. So then it's a perfect host vessel, if you will, for those pre-flood Nephilim spirits to get into, thus bringing about their return. And the result of that, according to Genesis 6, was that they had only evil continually in their hearts and mind. And when I looked at that scripture, I was thinking, well, wait a minute. There are plenty of people in history that have done very bad things. I mean, you look at the Nazis or what have you, they did terrible things, but, clearly they had tender moments with their wife, their children or whatnot. Yeah. They didn't have only, even though they did bad things, they didn't have only evil continually. And as I was thinking about that idea, one of the Spider-Man movies had come out, and I went to see it. And it was the one where the lizard was his primary nemesis in the film. But the story was that this guy was a scientist. He was a good guy. He had lost part of his arm from the elbow down, and obviously would would love to have his arm back, you know, so he was looking at genetics, trying to figure out what is the genetic code that enables lizards, if you cut their tail off, you know, it grows back. What is the code for limb regeneration? So he starts cutting off the legs of mice and what have you and injecting them with lizard DNA, trying to figure out how to blend the code to, you know, make the mouse leg grow back. And finally, after many failures, he has a success. So he's like, great, you know, the mouse's leg grows back. So he's like, cool. So he injects his stump of his arm with this new concoction of lizard DNA. And sure enough, his arm grows back. Yay! Awesome. The problem is he had an unfortunate side effect in that he became a giant lizard-human hybrid that had only evil continually in his heart and mind thereafter the corruption. So, you know, I'm going, wow, I mean, Hollywood gets it. You know, I believe that's exactly what was going on in the pre-flood world, and that's the danger of the blending of species that we're looking at in the near future. But the sales pitch is there. Hey, you know, have Spidey sense, you know, be like the Hulk or Wolverine. You know, the sales pitch is going to be there for, quote unquote, improving the human race, but I think the end result is going to be only evil continually.
Isn't that the way it always is, especially when you're in the political realm? You know, we're going to improve your lives. But can anybody say the government has improved anybody's life?
Yeah, well, I remember that. What was the sales pitch? A time for change.
Yeah.
It wasn't good change.
Well, what was Reagan's famous thing? The 7 words you never want to hear. We're from the government, and we're going to help. So you don't want to never hear that. Speaking of that, I meant, do you think that the guy at the sitting in the White House, could he be perhaps a hybrid of some sort?
Well, I don't know if he's a hybrid, but there's some researchers out there who claim that he's a clone. And I don't know if you've ever seen Freeman Fly's work on that, but he's another guy out there who's got some really interesting ideas and compelling research regarding the idea that Obama could be a clone of Akhenaten.
Yeah, we're going to have him on actually this month, the 26th, and we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, talk to him about that because it's pretty wild stuff.
Okay, let's go. What about somebody brought this up in the live chat? I see during the Super Bowl, one of the commercials was the grossest commercials that I saw any of them. That was the famous puppy monkey baby thing. Did you see that?
I haven't seen it, but a lot of people have told me about it.
It's disgusting. It's like, are you really trying to make a commercial? Am I supposed to buy something by looking at this creature running around like that? You know, I mean, you talk about human-animal hybrid type of looking thing. And I'm thinking, it makes no sense. Certainly, did that go through a focus group? Or did it go through, did it go through
ad?
Yeah, this should have been on a Gong show, but somehow somebody come up with that and decided that millions of people needed to see that. But then again, the previous Super Bowl, or at least one or two of them ago, when not this last one with Beyonce, but the last time that Beyonce was in, she had a website. It may still be there, but there's this thing on her website that you change it, and she goes from Beyonce to Sasha Fierce, the demon that is driving her and giving her energy and fame. And you can move the scroll button on that website to see her transform. So you think that there is a subliminal messages coming out to prepare us for what these Nephilim are coming and the eventual human hybrid and transhumanism.
Oh, yeah. Did you watch the reboot of The X-Files?
No, but Jade, our moderator, keeps telling me to watch it. I skipped over that one, so I'm waiting for it to come out on Netflix.
Well, it's what it was all about, man. Transhumanism, blending of species, and the not to give too much away, but the last episode, the government had released a intentional pandemic, this virus, whatever, to kill everybody off. But the only solution was to take alien DNA. This vaccine that had alien DNA. And so, I don't know if they're going to go past it. I think they did this miniseries to see if there's a renewed interest or not, to see if there's, if it's viable to restart the X-Files or not. They left it on a cliffhanger, so clearly they would like to continue beyond episode 6. But that's definitely the path that they were taking with this. And other TV shows are showing it too. I mean, there's lots of shows out there with this transhumanist agenda. But I mean, this is, science fiction TV shows, but if you go to 2045.com and read about the 2045 Strategic Social Initiative, these are like some of the most bright, intelligent scientists in the world getting together in these symposiums, talking about they want to achieve immortality by the year 2045. We would say parenthetically without God, but to do so through transhumanism.
Mm-hmm. Oh, somebody just put a picture of that monkey puppy baby looking thing there in the chat. There is here, let me just rephrase it. I'll tell you what. Let me go to this question out of the live chat. It says our DNA strands are shortened, and so is our lifespan. So you think that if they could lengthen our DNA strands, that we could have longer life, or if they shorten them, we have shorter life?
Yeah, that's a great question, and other researchers have been talking about this also. That again, if we go to the example that Yeshua gave, that our days will be like the days of Noah. Well, they were living close to 1,000 years back then. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was something that came along in this transhumanism spiel. I mean, that's what they're, like I said, they're trying to achieve immortality. Well, maybe a street sign on the way to immortality is extended life. Mm-hmm. That if they could extend human life to, let's say, even 500 years, well, that would give them 500 years to improve on the science that gave them those 500 years, or 400 extra years, to see if they could try to achieve immortality.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about the Nephilim impregnating one another. Where would that be? Would that be in space, in the Middle Earth, on the flat Earth? I mean, on the other side of the flat Earth, or?
Well, no, it was in the land of Canaan. In Numbers 13:33, it says that these were Nephilim that came from the Nephilim. Mm-hmm. And because I've read some Nephilim researchers that think that the Nephilim were sterile, and they base that on looking at other hybrids in nature, mules or what have you, donkeys or whatever. I don't know, different types of hybrids that are in real life that are sterile, but we see a number of places that these are the giants that are born to the giant in Gath, Goliath and his brothers, and the Anakim. The Anakim were sons of Anak, who was a son of Arba, who was, I believe, a Amorite, son of Canaan, son of Ham. So clearly, Nephilim can have children, which begs the question then, were there female Nephilim also? Well, if you look through the various mythologies, you had almost as many female goddesses, in the Olympians or Titans, as you had males. So, I don't have any problem believing that there were female Nephilim as much as there were male Nephilim, and they were not sterile. And also, I believe that they grew at a normal rate as a human does, except they just didn't stop growing. Like, you and I probably stopped growing at roughly age 16 or what have you. We've got a code in our DNA that says, Rob stops growing at, 5'11" at age 16. Mm-hmm. Well, they apparently are missing that code and keep growing. So, but they would be of, let's say, mating size with normal human women from their early teens, probably well into their 20s, if not 30s, that they could have still been of the appropriate size to have still mated with a normal human until, obviously they would have been too big for that to take place with normal women. But if they've got female giants to mate with, then no big deal. I mean, they just grow up together and do their thing.
Is there any historical story on the Nephilim of say lesbian Nephilim?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know, but I'm certain if you look through some of the Greek myths and stuff like that, they were pretty promiscuous. Oh boy, that you might find something of that nature. Okay, all
right. Let's go. This question is from Squirrel on the live chat. Do you think that the Nephilim genetically modified viruses like the H1N1 or Zika or Ebola?
Yeah, that is something a lot of researchers are looking into right now. I mean, it's certainly a great way to get the rewrite going of your DNA. I mean, just looking at GMOs, genetically modified foods, that I was watching a documentary called I think it was called Seeds of Death, and it was a documentary against what certain companies out there are doing to modify our food and how it changes RNA, and the RNA tells the DNA what to do and how things work, and how when you eat genetically modified food, you are bringing that type of information into your body, which is changing us also at a genetic level, which was part of the X-Files theme too, by the way. They're talking about how the elite have been doing things to compromise our immune system and to change us at a genetic level. And, when you start changing at a genetic level, I mean, I believe that the mark of the beast is going to be something at a genetic level that changes you such that you are no longer redeemable after that happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you something, Rob. What do you think your life expectancy? What's your actuary on your life expectancy, you think?
Me personally, or humans in general?
No, you.
Well,
bring it home.
I'd like to hope that I honored my mom and dad, and that I would have a long and healthy life as a result. That's a promise, in Scripture. Okay. Psalm 90 verse 10 defines a generation as 70 years, 80 if by strength. Okay. My grandmother's well into her 90s and still doing great. So, I'd like to. I mean, the world is seemingly going to hell in a handbasket, but I'm passionate that I believe we have a mission and a purpose for being here, and I hope we have more time to do what we're called to do.
So if the doctors told you that they could just make a little bitty tweak in your DNA, would you accept it?
I would not be interested in that. No.
And what you're saying earlier about the one who discovered the reptilian regrowth of the limb. It kind of sounds like a Twilight Zone thing, that where for every time you cross the boundaries, there's a Twilight Zone twist. The irony of it, that you just cannot, and humans keep trying to change, like I say, well, it's okay to change the definition of marriage. They keep trying to change it, but there's always this Foxian deal with the devil. It's always a Twilight Zone repercussion that you get. You never get away with that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it all sounds really good on the front end.
There are boundaries, and every time we go past those boundaries, human species go past those boundaries, it's total negative. It's chaos, it's crime, it's hate, it's disease. It seems as if there's the rules that are written that just cannot be violated.
Go figure. God meant what he said when he said, hey, it's a good idea to obey me. I know what I'm talking about when I set these rules down for you.
Mm-hmm. Of course, man always has pride to believe that they can change those rules, and then the repercussions of them, they say, well, we need to change a few more rules because this one isn't working so well, but these other rules apply to that rule. So they'll keep going on. Yeah. Down the road to try to get you to forget that the first rule change won't work. But it does seem like there's sort of a Star Trek-ish non-interference thing, though, from say aliens coming down and interfering. But what about the Nephilim? They don't seem like they're under any such restriction.
Well, that the reason the angels were punished so severely for doing what they did is because that was a great sin, what they did. In fact, if you read the book of Enoch, Semjaza, who is the leader of the 200, he knew it. He even said it. He says, this thing we're about to do is a great sin. And he was afraid that he was going to go through with it and all his buddies were going to leave him hanging, that they weren't going to do it. And so they all took a mutual vow on Mount Hermon, which is, I guess, why Mount Hermon is called Mount Hermon, because of this vow, that they said, hey, nope, we're all in. We're going to do it. We're going to go through with it. And then, of course, they did. And like you said, there's this horrible repercussion afterwards, and that's a lot of the rest of the book of Enoch is pronouncing the severe judgment on the Watchers for what they did. So they knew what they were doing before they even did it was going to come with a really high price punishment. So, but they when you think about it, they were successful. Genesis 6:12 says that all flesh had become corrupted. All flesh. That's from a military perspective. If you're thinking about a military campaign, that's a pretty successful campaign. 200 angels come down, mate with women, and the byproduct after 1,200 years of that hybridization and what they taught men to do, that's another part of this, is they taught men secrets that they weren't supposed to, be privy to. It resulted in the corruption of all flesh, such that God had to say, okay, if I don't step in and do something about it, nothing's going to be saved. Well, in the last days, Jesus uses very similar terminology when he says, except those days be shortened, no flesh would be saved.
Well, talking about the great deception, that if it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived, could that deception include the promise of science, that with a few DNA alterations, genetic modifications, that humans would be much better, healthier, smarter, stronger, better sex, the whole thing? Is that part of the deception you think that the Christian world will eventually embrace? And do you see the beginning, as some of these major televangelists now are saying that that Muslim God is the same as a Christian God, or some have said that Jesus may not necessarily be the only way. It is for Christians, but there are other ways for other religions. Do you see that whole concept evolving into this great deception?
Well, that question's enough for a whole 2-hour show in and of itself. The short answer would be yes. And my first presentation I ever did, my first DVD, was called Mythology and the Coming Great Deception. And it dealt with, the various ancient myths and what has been will be done again, and how we're doing a repeat of all that kind of stuff. And, aliens and UFOs and all that stuff playing a part of it. But, we talked briefly about the flat earth issue. And, a lot of people roll their eyes as soon as they hear it and think it's totally ridiculous and completely insane. But those are people who haven't spent an hour doing any research of their own. When you start doing the research and looking into this issue, and I would say there's 4 books total. For number one, the Bible. But after the Bible, there's 3 books: Zetetic Astronomy, Earth Not a Globe, an experimental inquiry into the true figure of the Earth by Dr. Samuel Robenham, 1865. The second book would be 100 Proofs That the Earth is Not a Globe by William Carpenter, 1885. And the third book is Terra Firma, the Earth Not a Planet, Proof from Scripture, Reason, and Fact by David Wardlaw Scott, copyright 1901. Unless you've read those 4 books, you haven't even begun to do any investigation. You haven't even begun. And never mind going outside and doing practical tests like we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. And if, and I'm saying if, because I'm not completely sold myself, but if it turns out that we are on a stationary, still flat, circular world set on pillars under the dome that called a firmament, then that would have to be the greatest deception of all. That even the elect would, if that's true, then the elect are already thoroughly deceived by it, because you've got a whole lot of people going crazy on social media, saying that this is ridiculous and blah, 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 and they all believe in the spinning ball. Contrary to the fact that, the Bible in no way supports a spinning heliocentric ball. The Great Deception is called the Great Deception for a reason. It's going to be very great, and this is why I created the website Testing the Globe in the first place, because I think we need to start getting into the practice and the regular habit of testing all things. As Paul said, we should prove all things, hold on to what is good. We only become good at what we practice, so if we haven't even started to practice testing all the things that we think we believe, then I think we could fall victim to the Great Deception, whatever it may be.
Well, it does say it is a measure of kings to find out a matter. It seems like we need to question every matter to fulfill our duty. Interestingly enough, from a political sideline here, Donald Trump said that there are 250 million Christians in the United States, and they're the only group that's not represented nationally by anything, and which adds credence to the fact that there are videos out there of, say, Planned Parenthood selling body parts, clearly selling body parts, given the price, and then the Congress can't even subtract funding, at least just for that part, the abortion part of Planned Parenthood. So it doesn't seem that the majority has any effect. So when it comes down to, say, the government said we're going to mandate, as, say, the extension of Obamacare has to be that they've crossed the boundary of government ordering people to buy a product. It could also cross the boundary later that the government will order people to get the inoculation to enhance the population of the United States. And it seems that the Christians don't have the will, the power, or the intellect to stop such a thing.
Oh, I agree. I've got a teaching called Archon Evasion 2045 and the Quest for Immortality. And in that one, I talk about the dangers of vaccines and the whole theory that the mark of the beast could come in the form of a syringe, and yeah, you've got Christians out there who, anything their doctor tells them is gospel. And this is what cracks me up. I don't watch regular TV hardly at all. I mean, if I'm watching something, it's on Netflix or Hulu and, whatnot. But whenever I've seen like people watching regular TV, it seems, especially in the afternoon, people are watching afternoon television, it is loaded with pharmaceutical commercials. And I just can't, I'd walk by and I'd listen and they were, side effects include blah, blah, like who in their right mind would even consider ever taking that drug?
Exactly.
And yet they're all going out, the doctor told me I need this, so they're going out and taking it. And I'm like, man, that's not cool.
Yeah, after you hear that list of stuff, it's like, are you crazy? Who would take that crap?
Exactly. Yeah. Someday, I don't know if somebody's ever done it, but I wish I had the time. I would like to just accumulate as many of those as possible and put them all together in one long video.
Yeah.
Just show how completely absurd and ridiculous it is.
May cause death, arm, limb loss, brain may fall out, grow a tail. I mean, grow hair on your palms. All right, let's get a couple more questions coming in here for you. Rob Skiba, one, this is from Rob Baxter. Do you think the Watchers are the tall grays, and what do you think about Phil Schneider?
Rob Baxter, what's up, dude? Calm Crash.
That's him.
Yeah. Well, the Greys, I mean, some people think that the Greys are the Watchers, and maybe it fits with their big bulbous eyes and whatnot. Others suggest that the Greys may be biosuits that the fallen ones are creating. The demons are looking for bodies to get into, but now Christians can cast them out. So okay, what if they could create their own body? And some speculate that maybe that's why you have cattle and human mutilation and things like that, where they're taking genetic material and building biosuits for them to be in. So that's one possibility. What was the second part of that question?
What do you think about Phil Schneider?
Well, I asked David Stinnett about him. Now, I've seen quite a number of interviews with Phil Schneider, and he's very convincing. And for quite a while, I believed his story. But then I talked to David Stinnett, who's he's a Christian, but he's also a member of MUFON and regularly goes out in the field and investigates UFO sightings and abduction cases and things of that nature. And I interviewed him not too long ago. He thought he was a fraud. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. I mean, I know that they are doing deep underground military bases and things of that nature, and you hear
that's fun.
Yeah,
that's fun. Hey, Rob Baxter says, "What's up, Skiba?" All right, how about this here? What do you think about the mermaids on TV? They seem to be washing up on the shore.
Well, I heard that was a hoax also, but that was interesting that it did make its rounds on social media for quite a while right there. So, I mean, why are these things being put out there? I mean, are they trying to desensitize us? Because there's people that they want to believe this stuff. I mean, look at Fox Mulder. He's got the poster behind him. I want to believe. Right. So, I mean, people, they'll put these things out there little by little, and when these things actually do manifest for real, people are already – it's not going to be a big deal. I think that if you look at the War of the Worlds, and Orson Welles did that radio broadcast, people freaked out. They just went berserk. I mean, because if you missed that little disclaimer in like the first 5 or 10 minutes of the broadcast where they said, this is a drama or whatever, and you just came home from work, turned on the radio to listen to the evening news like you always did and heard what sounded like a legitimate news broadcast, and you're sucked into this and you're like, what? And the aliens were described, basically the description given for them was like the water towers. So, if you're listening to this thinking this is real life news and you look outside and you see the water tower down the street that's been there, for 30 years, but your brain is not registering that because you're listening to the radio, you're like, wow, they're here. I mean, people flipped out. And, I have to wonder if that wasn't a psyop, if they were just testing the waters to see, okay, how are people going to react to this? Because then after that, there are all these B movies that came out in the 50s and everything, the brain on Mars or, whatever, all these ridiculous B movies of aliens. And now, you get to Independence Day, the movie Independence Day, and they're showing people on the roof of the building, take me.
So you're saying that the Orson Welles thing was the first false flag radio broadcast?
It could be.
All right, here's a question from me, too, out of the live chat. It says, Rob, do you have any thoughts on the RH blood factor since we don't believe the monkey man lie? Could it be reptilian instead?
Well, yeah, I wrote a section on that in my book, Archon Invasion, and it's been a while since I looked at that, but that question kept coming up over and over and over again. What about the RH negative factor? Now, they call it RH because of the rhesus monkey, and that comes from evolutionary mindset. And as I recall, what it is it's an antigen that you either have or you don't have on, I think it's the D antigen. I forget what it ever. But anyway, it's an antigen on the blood cell, and some people don't have it, and it's a very small percentage of the human population that don't have it. I think if I remember right, it's like 15% of the world's population have this. Everybody else doesn't, and it's not found anywhere else in the animal kingdom. So that's got the evolutionists kind of going, oh, well, we don't know what to do with this. Mm-hmm. And my speculation on it is that may have been introduced into the human genome as a result of the initial incursion of angels, because what do angels have a need for this D antigen to be on their blood cell? You know, I mean, they don't have any need for it. And as I recall, I remember reading something a while back when I was really hot on the trail trying to figure out what the deal is with the Shroud of Turin, that the blood on the Shroud of Turin was AB negative, that it was Rh negative. Well, I mean, if it is, in fact, the burial shroud of Yeshua, whose father, you know, was not of this world, you know, is God the Father, then, you know, that may lend some credence to the idea that the Rh factor came into the human genome as a result of spiritual entities intermingling with the human race. But I don't think that in any way makes somebody not redeemable, because some people freak out. Well, wait a minute, does that mean I'm a Nephilim or whatever? No. People freak out about stuff like that. You know, you say something like that and you say, well, you know, if this came as first of all, when they hear fallen angel, they think about what they've seen in the movies for fallen angels. Yeah. But you got to realize a fallen angel is exactly the same, if we could use the term genetically, is exactly physically, genetically the same as a good angel. They were just rebellious. They chose wrong. They did bad things. But physically speaking, they're no different than the good angels.
Yeah. Well, I have no problem freaking people out.
Yeah, well, you know, it is one of those subjects that freak people out, but I mean, it's a fascinating subject because, I mean, I put a whole bullet point list of different things that are characteristics of the Rh negative, and one of the things I found in my research was that a high number of abductees, you know, so-called UFO alien abductions, are people who have Rh negative. And something else I read, it seemed like they can't be cloned. That type of blood can't be cloned. Lots of interesting stuff. I mean, I wrote, like I said, a section of it in my book, and I also I could send you the link if you're interested. I put it up for free on my website, just that section as a PDF, so people can read through, you know, what I came to in that regard.
Send it, man. Everything you're looking at and doing is just awesome, man. It's really digestible and fun to listen to too. We're all learning something tonight. Let's go to the next question we have for you. We were talking about in the first hour, kind of continued in the second hour, that the Nephilim impregnated each other. They impregnated Earth women. But is it possible, as this question from Colt 45, could it have been then, say, like even when Jesus cast the pigs and they went into water, could the Nephilim go into the ocean, impregnate the fish, and then you got mermaids?
Well, I don't know that the demons have the ability to impregnate. You know, I'm aware of incubus and succubus and things of that nature, that clearly seem to be demonic entities that you can read about in history. But I don't know that they have the ability to pass on their genetic seed like an angel does. Some people may disagree with that have done more research, so I would defer to their research on that. But people who study like satanic ritual abuse and things of that nature.
But if you're talking about giants, though, wasn't in Greek history, wasn't Neptune a giant?
Yeah, I believe people like Zeus and Neptune and whatnot, I believe that they were either, well, if we think of them in terms of Olympians, then they are a second or third generation Nephilim, because you have the Titans as the first generation. You know, so the first generation are direct angel-human hybrids. The Olympians in the Greek mythology would be the children of the Titans, so they would be the offspring of Nephilim, Titan, first generation mating with each other. And also you have some of these characters mating with normal human women too, so you have the demigods and things of that nature. So while some people think Zeus is an angel, is a fallen angel, and I understand that he is associated with the seat of Satan in Revelation. I think it's chapter 2. The seat of Satan in Pergamum was the altar of Zeus in Pergamum. So there's a connection between Satan and Zeus there. But I don't think that Zeus was Satan, at least if you look at his mythology. He was born, so I don't see any record of angels being born. He grew up. I don't see any record of angels growing up. And he died. So it was buried on Gnosis, I think, was his final resting place. But so I don't view him, assuming Zeus, Hades, and Neptune were, assuming they were real, I believe that they were Nephilim. These, in my opinion, were what Genesis 6:4 talks about, the great men of renown, the heroes of old. I believe that's what they would qualify for.
Is there any sort of preparation that you think humans, and particularly Christians who apparently have the power to wrestle against these spiritual entities and possibly overcome them as well, is there any preparation that should be made for what's coming?
Well, yeah. First of all, get on God's page, get right with God, accept His Son, Yeshua, Jesus Christ, as your Lord and Savior, because greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. And when you are empowered with the Holy Spirit, then I believe that we could stand up to these things the same way David, or better yet, David's going up against a runt. Goliath was a short guy. Let's go back to Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb went up against some real big dudes. And Caleb, really, I mean, when you consider that they were potentially going up against 20 to 36 footers, and you read Caleb's like, hey, what's the problem? We can do this. We're well able to overcome them. You know, Joshua and Caleb were the only two that didn't bring, of the spies that went in the land, that didn't bring back a terrified report. They're like, hey, what's the problem? And then after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, they're like, okay, time to get down to business. And, this guy, he's an older guy now, Caleb, after 40 years in the wilderness. And he says, give me Kiriath Arba. That's what he wanted. Kiriath Arba, well, Kiriath Arba was the city of Arba. Arba is the father of Anak, the father of the Anakim, that were the people that they encountered 40 years prior in the wilderness. And when they came in from the wilderness to the land of Canaan, when they sent the spies in. So literally, Caleb's like, give me the biggest and the baddest of all of them. I'm going after them. And after he takes Kiriath Arba, he says, hey, I need some guys to help me out with Kiriath Deber. And I think he gave his daughters as a prize. Whoever the guy who helps me defeat them, you can marry my daughter or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Kiriath Deber, that's the city of the books. So I don't know what that means, but I've always been intrigued by that because I'm like, wait a minute, he took out the biggest and the baddest, but then he needed help taking out this other place in the city of the books. What are the books? So again, I don't know what it means, but it makes for fantastic storytelling. But these were people who believed God and walked in the Spirit. And, David's like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? What's the problem? Get this armor off of me. I don't need your stuff, Saul. Take it. I'm going out there with a slingshot. And I think he picked up 5 smooth stones because he knew that Goliath had some brothers. I don't think he thought he was going to miss,
in many stories in the spiritual guidebook and the Older Testament, there seem to be armies, God's armies with leaders. It does seem like they're in many cases there were singular things such as David and Goliath and a certain individual. There are other cases just a single prophet against different things. But in other places it indicates a hierarchy of leaders bringing the armies of God against, or God's chosen against the enemies. Rob, you obviously are very knowledgeable on this subject, and I would say as a military leader, you would know more than anyone from just listening to this broadcast tonight and your other broadcasts with us, that you have an intrinsic knowledge of the operations of these entities, the Nephilim and the giants and their histories, what they're doing, what they can do. Is it possible that you actually have been prepared to be a leader because others would say, yeah, we agree with you, we're going to fight these demons, but you have the direct knowledge, so therefore you think you're being prepped as a leader of one of the armies?
Wow. Well, I would never presume that to be true, but it would be an honor if it was true, because I have prayed, and I'll be honest with you, I have many times in my life prayed fervently that Coach put me on the field. I don't want to be sitting in the bleachers in the last days. So, if the answer to that prayer would be that, then I would be praying on a regular basis for the courage and wisdom of people like Joshua and Caleb and David, in these last days. To be aware of it, to research it's one thing, but to stand in front of a 36-footer, that's going to take a little more courage than I feel like I currently have at the moment. But I will say that in times that were pretty scary, that I was in the field as a missionary, dealing with soldiers walking around with AK-47s and stuff, that there were times that I was made intimately aware of the power of prayer. And where he says, don't worry about what you're going to say at that moment. I'll give you the words to say and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And that God works and does amazing things. And so I think, first of all, we have to know who we are, in him. Mm-hmm. In our identity as sons and daughters of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords of the universe, and if we truly know who we are, like David, Joshua, and Caleb did, then I think we can walk into these scenarios with a lot more courage than we would have otherwise, and knowing that the Holy Spirit is within us and greater is He that is in us than He that is in the world. But again, I wouldn't come out and say, I'm a chosen one of God and I know I'm going to be a leader. I'll let God decide that one, but it would be a tremendous honor if that's true.
Well, I was just thinking there could be some posers to say, in this end time battle scenario, you're out there leading the charge, and other people might be using you as a human shield, man. So you got to watch that. But to whom much is given, much is required, and you've been given quite a bit in that case.
Yeah, any researcher and teacher out there is painfully aware of that responsibility. I hear that a lot in my head. To whom much is given, much is required, and sometimes I think I don't want to be given anymore.
What is some of the hate mail you get? What comes across your way?
Oh, wow. Well, apparently I'm on the Illuminati payroll. That's a good one.
Okay.
That I'm a shill. I'll make mention of the fact that I moved to Texas when I was 33. So see,
that's a conspiracy.
He's throwing signals out. I saw Star Wars 13 times in the theater. The first time I saw it when I was a kid. Oh, see, 13. When I lived in Massachusetts, I lived on the 72nd parallel. Ooh, and then I moved to Texas on the 33rd parallel. See, yeah. I mean, all the signs are there, man. And if you've ever watched some of my videos, you've seen the poster behind me with the all-seeing eye. So,
oh no, not the all-seeing eye.
Yeah,
it definitely Illuminati there.
People who make those accusations are completely clueless, because that's the cover of my first book, which exposes all these things. Mm-hmm. But I've seen there's all kinds of videos and people out there. I'm a heretic, I'm a cult leader, I'm a whatever, a shill. But if I'm on the payroll, somebody screwed up in accounting, because I've never gotten any checks and no direct deposits showing up. So
yeah, all right. Here we go. Question.
I posted that link, by the way, in your chat room, and I posted it also for you in the Skype chat for the RH negative issue.
Oh, you did. Here, let's see. You already put it in the you put it in the live chat?
I put it in the live chat. You'll have to scroll up to find it, but I also put it in our Skype chat window.
Okay.
So Skype chat.
Good. All right, let's get a couple more final questions here. Says this is from the live chat. Does Steve Quayle exhibit any symptoms of mania?
Well, I'm not going to engage in any speculation on that one, but I will say this. When I listen to too much Steve Quayle, I get pretty manic myself, thinking, because, you listen to some of these guys, and it really is tempting to think tomorrow's the end of the world. Because that's what it sounds like. And, I would just say this. I believe that he's a watchman on the wall, and that he's doing the best he can with the information that he has, and he's doing what he believes is right to inform the masses. But again, if you listen to too much of that, you can get really kind of – have you ever heard the story I told about the Russian helicopter in Plano?
No, man. Got to hear that.
Oh, okay. So I'm listening to Steve Quayle, right? I was listening to it for like a week straight. And really into everything he had to say, and he was making a really good case that the coming weekend, this is a number of years ago, could be a bank holiday, that you could end up going to the bank and you can't get any of your accounts, everything's locked down. And he was making a really good case to get on honest weights and measures to get silver and gold and get your money out of the banks, And so I listened to this guy, and he's making a real good case. I'm following what he's saying. I'm watching the news, and I'm going, well, it makes sense to me what he's saying. So I didn't have a whole lot of money in the bank to begin with, but I liquidated pretty much everything that was in there except for the minimum amount to keep the account open.
Wow.
And I pulled it all out, and my intention was to go get silver and gold. So I walk out of the bank, Chase Bank, and I'm talking to a buddy of mine on the phone who's a former airborne guy in the Army. And as I hear the sound of a helicopter, and I look up, and there's a Russian Hind D helicopter, Mi-24, flying really low, coming down on an approach, like right over the bank, headed like right toward me. Oh. Now, I spent the better part of my military career, especially after I became a pilot, doing threat identification drills where, we do flashcards and stuff, silhouettes and all kinds of stuff to identify enemy aircraft, and so when I saw that thing, I'm having all these flashbacks about, when I was in the Army. I'm going, holy cow, there's a Russian Hind D flying right at me. I'm telling my buddy,
Gosh.
He's like, what? I'm like, hang on, I'll call you back. So I see it like it's coming in for a landing, and I knew there's a field, an airfield, a small private airplane field nearby. Mm-hmm. So I'm figuring that's where they're going. So I'm like, well, I'm going to go see what's going on here. So I get in my car, I get to a red light. I had to go take a couple of turns to get down to that street. Well, as I'm stuck at this red light, I see a second helicopter coming in. Now I'm really freaking out because I'm like, I saw the first one and now I see a second one. And so I'm thinking, this is Red Dawn, man. This is Wolverine, and I see this helicopter land at the end of the runway, which is butts right up to the street that I was on. And there was a QT racetrack gas station right across the street. So I pull in there and I see this helicopter land and start to wind down. And, everybody in Texas is packing. Everybody's got, shotguns or pistols or whatever. So I'm with a couple of good old boys in their truck, wearing the hat like you have there, Right. And we're looking over there and everybody's kind of taking inventory. What do you have? Well, I got a 45. I got a shotgun, like whatever. We didn't know what was going on here. And meanwhile, as this helicopter starts to wind down, all these people, of course, it drew a lot of attention. All these people start getting out of their cars and walking toward the helicopter. I'm like, didn't you see the movie? I'm like freaking out. Like, if you remember Red Dawn, the teacher, the Russians landed in the football field, and the kids are all looking out the window and the teacher walks out. Hey, what's going on? You guys, get off course or something? And the guy takes an AK-47 and, wastes the teacher and starts shooting up the school. So I'm freaking out thinking I'm going to see a bloodbath here, Well, then when the helicopter finally wound down, and a dude got out wearing civilian clothes. I'm like, what? And then I looked and I saw that the armament arms, the side arms there, they didn't have weaponry on them. Now my eyes filled in the blanks when I saw it flying because I had spent so many years, looking at those things. I could swear that I saw the weaponry on the Hind D has those arms, wings that stick out, rocket launchers. I could swear I saw it, but when it landed and kind of everything calmed down, I'm like, oh, okay. But what that told me was that if that was a real world scenario and if it did have armament and if it was a Red Dawn scenario, most of those people were dead. They would have been completely wasted. Only those who had a clue of what could be going down would have survived, And so, if you put yourself in my mindset, I just listened to Steve Quayle for a week and was going to the bank to liquidate my bank account because I thought something was going to go down, and combine that with seeing the Russian helicopter, I got a little bit manic myself right there for a little while. So, I would just say to people, hey, look, balance that type of information with going out to a park and throwing a Frisbee with your kid, and walking on the beach and realizing it's not all evil and bad out in the world. Because if you spend all your time focusing, yes, be aware of it. But if you spend all your time focusing on it, you're going to go down a dark path and it'll drive you crazy.
Well, I certainly don't mind going down dark paths. Man, Rob, it sounds like you have had a lot of experiences. And as we kind of finish up, in the first hour, you said that you had interactions with shadow people, and you've relayed a lot of the experiences you have had. Are these things continuing? And do you think that you are seeing these because you are so adept into the field of the supernatural, and then correlating that to other folks? If people were to say study the deeper subjects of the spiritual guidebook and research things other than say what's good to wear, what car's fun to drive, but what's going on. Do you think that people would other folks would start to have experiences and maybe see into the spiritual realm?
I was actually warned by an individual a while back when I first started to look into the subject of the Nephilim, and this person told me, well, be warned because you better make sure you've got your spiritual armor on if you're going down that path, because the enemy doesn't like his plans to be exposed, So I would just say, yeah, it's interesting, it's exciting types of stuff, it's intriguing to look into, but yeah, make sure you've got your spiritual armor on and don't be opening up doorways. Various types of sin and things that you can do in your life can be openings, invitations, doorways that can invite the attack. You know, and I would also say, and I've learned this, the more vocal I became and the more I started doing public speaking and publishing books and stuff like that, that there's a real need for intercessory prayer. That it goes back to the Ephesians 6 deal, that have a group of people that are dedicated to praying for you. You know, it's like every good military must make sure that they've got a headquarters behind the lines that has a good supply line, has a good communication line, that has everything that they need to equip the frontliners that are going to go out and fight the battle.
So those folks then that maybe not necessarily are making these encounters, but know it's going on, say, well, I'm not called to be in battle, but they might be called to be the support group for those that are at the tip of the spear.
It could be, or they could they could have an opening somewhere in their house where somebody else, like I said, other people were doing things that brought these entities in. And I know for a fact that one of the people that was a friend of my sister's had it out for me and wanted to take me out. And so, you know, various people doing things to try to take you out is a real thing. You know, that kind of thing can happen. So, you know, were these early attempts to take me out before I even got into any of this stuff? I don't know. I can only speculate at this point. But boy, I have really become, and sometimes painfully aware that the battle is real, that it is spiritual and physical, and that it takes a toll on you. You know, if you're not ready and prepared for it.
Well, I know that you know the kind of the sideline title of this program, the Edge broadcast, is enlightening, entertaining, and controversial. But I think those that have watched the show for a long time know that some things I say that seem like have a little bit of humor to them. But I don't think anybody, if they've heard me after so many years, doesn't believe that I am absolutely aware of the seriousness of the matters out there at hand, and that you know the preparation that you said that needs to be made, particularly with one's spiritual well-being, it certainly does need to be made. Rob Skiba, we're at the end of the broadcast. Any final conclusions that you'd like to say, or anything about your websites or books? You go right ahead.
Okay. Well, like I said, robschannel.com. I actually created that because I was having trouble finding my own stuff. Like I've got so much stuff out there. I'm like, I need a hub. So that would be the primary website these days now, robschannel.com. You could also punch my name in YouTube. Just punch in Rob Skiba, and you'll find my YouTube channel. And, of course, BabylonRisingBooks.com is where you can find my books, and that'll take you to my blogs and other stuff. And just in closing, I would say, hey, the battle's real. And, you know, I don't know how much time we have left. I'm not one who thinks tomorrow is the end of the world. I think we've got a bit more time. But whatever the case may be, we are to occupy until our Lord comes back. And if you don't yet have a relationship, there's no better time than today, and you're not promised tomorrow. So get right with God now. And, you know, I would suggest that everybody pray the same prayer that I've been praying if time is indeed short, and that is, Coach, put us in the field. You know, we've got a job to do.
Well, we always have time, but I go overtime for that kind of ending right there, Rob. I mean, you know, I think preparation is the key. And do you? Let me ask you on a personal note: do you fast? Do you anoint your house with oil? I mean, how far do you go in preparation?
Yeah, you know, I haven't done that in a while. Maybe I should, but yeah, for sure. Praying a lot. And back in 2003, when I was really beginning the preparation for a lot of the stuff I'm doing today, I was fasting a lot, man. And yeah, doing the anointing with oil and that sort of thing. So that's part of the spiritual battle. You know, those are some of the tools that we've been given that are actually very powerful.
When you did that, do you feel like you received more insight in the things you were studying?
Oh, yes. And in fact, you know, 10 years later, I took a step back and kind of looked at my collection of work that I was able to achieve in a very short period of time. I thought, wow, God, you know, I mean, the early years were mostly consisting of praying and fasting and begging and pleading and, you know, please, you know, help me figure this stuff out. But then when the floodgates opened, all that information came very, very quickly and was disseminated as books and DVDs and conferences and YouTube videos and stuff like that, radio shows, within a matter of a year or two. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was huge, but it took years of preparation to lead up to that floodgate. So
somebody that feels like they don't have it, they don't have the information, they don't have the spiritual insight. Are you saying that the logjam in their life might be that they're not doing adequate preparation then?
Yeah, I would say so. I was talking with somebody today at the Bible study I was at this afternoon, and he says, I realized something. It's not just given to us. We've got to seek. It's a seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open to you. We have to do our part, which requires us actively going out, looking, pleading, searching into the deeper things of God for Him to reveal those things. And you talked earlier about my TV series Seed, and I'll just give a quick insight here to everybody, because a lot of people wonder why I use the number 33 and $3.33 and things like that. Well, it's right on the front page of my Seed website. Jeremiah 33:3 is why I'm using the number. Jeremiah 33:3 is a verse that says, "Ask me, and I will tell you remarkable secrets you do not know about things to come." And that's been my prayer. That's why I believe I've been given some of the revelation I've been given, is because I've been asking for it.
Okay. Well, I think that's what we need to do. And you're saying if we seek, we're going to find. And if we prep, we're going to be able to fight the forces of hell and the Nephilim that's coming our way. Ron Skiba, I appreciate you coming back on the Edge Television broadcast. Can we have you back on again sometime?
Love to do it, man. Enjoy it. Always enjoy hanging out and talking with you.
All right, man. Well, thanks for calling in.
Okay, brother.
All right.
Take care.
Bye. All right, everybody, that was Rob Skiba back talking about the Nephilim and the giants. Are you prepared? You need to be prepared, and we had some exciting insights there from Rob of how he prepares. And certainly, I think as we prepare, I think that our spiritual acumen will increase, and we will be all able to see the different things that's going on around us. There is a spiritual world around us. I think that's one of the singular points that I have seen over all the guest interviews that I've done, is that there is, in fact, a spiritual world out there, and we need to be ready for whatever's happening there. All right. Well, as everyone knows, I've changed the hat here. After 14 years, the old Charlie One Horse has been retired. There it is, right there. I'm going to put it in the archives. From now on, I'll be wearing this Stetson here. It was pretty bright, which goes better with the opening theme song, which is by Barry McGuire, Cosmic Cowboy, which is exactly what I announced myself as on this program. Next week, we're going to have James Willis talking about ghosts of Indiana and ghosts of Ohio. He says there is a battle between the two ghosts entities, and you can see I disturbed the background feed here with that hat here. Let me see if I can fix this thing here. So I got a feeling that the Indiana ghosts are much better at haunting and disturbing people's lives. And so therefore I want to kick all the ghosts back over to Ohio, because if they're aggravating you here in Indiana, I just want to kick them over to Ohio, because frankly, that's where John Kasich is. And I'm sick of him. I'm sick of every time he gets on a debate saying, how great Ohio is. Well, maybe we're going to have to send some ghosts over there and mess up his campaign. I'll say, all right, 2 weeks. Now, so we'll be talking about ghosts next week, but 2 weeks, Bill Bean's going to be with us, and he is going to be talking about how he exorcises ghosts. So as we learn about them and their hauntings and what they do, we'll find out how to get them the heck out of our life there. Jaja says, of course, right there, March 26th, Freeman Fly will be with us talking about symbology and whether or not Obama is a clone. And I tell you what, I believe he is. I can't pronounce the name. Akhenaten or Akhenuken or nobody. I don't know who that guy is. He's a dumb Egyptian freak. Some kind of disembodied spirit. I don't know who he is, but he might be a distant relative of Obama. And that could mean that's why he is such a freak. April 9th, Frank Fascino Jr. will be with us talking about the Flatwoods Monster. Do you know about the Flatwoods Monster? Well, find out about that. Hey, if you missed last week's science show, it is up on the internet. It is in our YouTube channel. It was Albert Rosales talking about flying humanoids and dumping crap on people's windshields. And then there's a question from Dreamwalker. It says, Daniel, has Trump contacted you for the VP? Frankly, I'm only available to be the president of the United States. And for those of you who are my Facebook friends, you know that it says President Daniel. Somebody sent me a note, said, why do you call yourself the president? Well, because I am the president, okay? Somehow they stole the office from me, and I'm going to get it back. I don't know how. So I don't know, but maybe I can be the VP, I suppose. Oh, there you go. Alrighty, well, that's going to be a wrap for tonight's show. Appreciate everybody logging on to the program. And we're going to see you next week. Daniel Ott for The Edge. Bye-bye.